Morning, everyone. Today, we want to talk in our live cast about front office. Recently I had the opportunity to take a product to version 1. And it's great because we're already working on new products and new things for different groups that are doing different things. This one happened to be specifically for practices that are integrated. These are practices that are generally owned by chiropractors or groups where they have a lot of great preventative and treatment care coming from chiropractic, physical therapy, trigger point injections, DME, all that stuff under one roof, which is really incredible. And so what I want to talk about today is kind of some of the experiences that go into that kind of a solution, and really the unsung heroes of such a product. Because what happens is, when you're working on such a product and you're working with a team and you're understanding their needs and their difficulties and the things that go into building such a product, one of the most basic requirements that comes up is we need something that's going to work within our flow. And so, when looking at building something like that on our Vericle engine, which is our practice management solution, one of the first things we ask is, all right, well, the most important thing is not losing patients when they come in the door, right? So it's not medical billing, it's not documentation. It really will come down to automation. And so when we look at this, obviously, the simplest thing is, when you come in, whether you're logging into, our medically integrated app, or you're logging into any one of our other apps, and you first get into the system, the most important thing really that comes up again is that front office work. And when you go into that front office work, the first question really that comes up is, well, how am I organizing my day so that it's really easy for me to know who's coming in, who needs what kind of care? And so one of the things that the front office talks about a lot is, especially in the integrated space, is how do I very easily or very quickly manage multiple appointments for a single patient. And the same, I think, is true of a practice that's not integrated, because a patient might come in for more than one piece of care, unrelated to the primary reason that they're there. But you might be a straight chiropractor with massage therapy or acupuncture in your clinic, and of course those are things that you may want to keep separate. And so you want to make sure, and you might be a chiropractor who has DME, or a physical therapist who, or have a physical therapist in your office, or be a physical therapist, or be a medical practitioner. And in all of those cases, we want to be able to differentiate things. One of the most basic things that came up was, well, in multiple appointments, oftentimes I'll set up a treatment plan, and then I need to, reschedule appointments. I need to move appointments. And so that's really where we want to be able to, when we go to reschedule something, we want to be able to reschedule all appointments at the same time. And that's really what we're talking about, the ability to, simple things like this that make our lives easier. The ability to reschedule a single appointment, the ability to reschedule an entire series of appointments for one clinician, or do it across all specialties if you're multi-specialty. Little things that come up, that when you're working with a practice owner, the question often is, how do I make sure that my notes are easy to do, or how do I make sure that my collections come in? And those are great questions. But what's really interesting, because those questions are, for us, very easily answered because our results are amazing and they're guaranteed. But the really interesting piece is when you get into it, you get into the details, and you start working with the individual office staff members, the front office, the back office, the office managers, where you actually need to be able to make their lives easier. And part of the challenge is, kind of like when you're working with a patient, you need to be able to show them that although they may experience an inconvenience in this part of their lives, the net effect of putting this into your life, into your office, is going to be much more positive than it was before. So kind of like, you tell a patient, well, you need to spend 20 minutes on a dental roll, or you need to start doing these exercises every day. Well, to a patient who's never exercised a day in their life, that's a huge inconvenience. But when we think about it from the clinical perspective, how do you measure that inconvenience against a pain-free life? Of course, having a pain-free life is going to be better, and we're going to want that instead. But it's a difficult transition to make. It's a difficult thing to justify. And so when we work with practice owners and their staff, that's one of the first things that we want to make sure of is, as we're working with the individual staff members, we understand their individual unique flow requirements and needs. And within those flow and requirement needs, we show them how much easier their life is going to be and how much better their life is going to be by making these changes, because they are fundamental changes. When you're going from having, a, let's call it a checklist on paper, right, of what you need to do every day, to an automated list that automatically tells you when you need to make follow-up calls, or automatically tells you to review an X-ray report or send an X-ray report somewhere. Suddenly, there's help coming to you where maybe you've justified not needing it before, or felt that you've justified it. And we talk a lot about community building and all of that, and in my book Treat or Be Treated, I talk about this a lot. But one of the basic problems that comes up in an office is when you have staff members who become relegated and who become comfortable with oversimplification or simplifying their workload. Oftentimes you lose the ability to make things better. You basically look at something that you're trying to, make better, and realize that you have to make this other part better, and that part requires a major shift in thinking. The first thing is to recognize that there is a lot of repeat stuff going on in an office. No matter what you do, although the patient may have a unique reason for something, the event is always the same. It's a no-show. It's a patient without a future appointment. It's a visit without notes. It's a visit without a claim generated. All of those, or a cancellation, all of those things can have different reasons behind them, but the event is the same. And the actions that we take based on those events are often very similar. So if a patient misses an appointment, regardless of the reason why they missed the appointment, with small exception, the action you're going to take is almost always the same. Call the patient, follow up, and get that patient rescheduled. And the same thing is true of probably the most complex part of owning a practice, which is the actual billing portion. Whether you're billing to insurance or you're billing straight to a patient, the ability to differentiate between different problems, like in the integrated model, having put in so many different rules, so many thousands of different rules to our database of over 2.5 million different rules, where you have things as simple as missing demographics to things as complex as P2P mismatches or D2P mismatches, which is procedure or diagnosis procedure mismatch. There are so many combinations of problems that can come up, or errors that can come up. Things as simple as trying to bill out, a 98940 and a 98941. Well, you're not going to get paid if you try to bill out two codes that both deal with adjusting, one for one area and one for 3 to 4, or 1 to 2, 3 to 4. You're going to get a denial, and the last thing you want to do is submit a claim. Even if you're doing it in real time, submit a claim for those 2 codes. It's going to get denied. But it's going to take 30 days for you to find out about the denial, up to 30 days for the insurance company to come back and tell you, right? Because they can give you all kinds of excuses for why they're not going to, why it took them so long to adjust. Maybe they were backed up, quote unquote. And 30 days later, you get the denial saying you can't bill out these codes. Then you need to update the claim. Then you need to resubmit it. And let's say you do get it paid. And at that point, it takes another 2 weeks. So now your AR went from a maximum of 2 weeks all the way to 6 weeks, right? And now the real issue comes in when you try to pay your staff, because your staff needs to get paid every month, generally twice a month. And so if you're waiting 6 weeks to get paid on something, and that's a common thing for you, now you're running into issues of payroll. Not to mention all of the issues that come up with collection rate. You know, you come into a situation where you want to maximize your ability, not just to pay your staff, but to, you know, send your kids to good schools, put food on the table. You know, there's that profit piece that needs to be there so that there's something left for you to take home. And you can't always be dependent on the goodwill of your patients to pay their bills on time. So when we start working on how to deal with these issues, the issue really becomes one of automation, becomes one of focus. And when we're able to work with office staff and discover that they're doing multiple things, and we can focus them in on the one thing that matters. And you think about it, all the things that they need to do in any other application or any other app, they need to do their day-to-day functions manually in many cases. And by manually, they might still be using some form of technology, but they need to manually keep track of what they're doing every day, right? They need to remember to take a copy of a license and an insurance ID card for every new patient and give them paperwork, and then do something with that paperwork. And all of that while 10 other things might happen all around them, and then something slips through the cracks, right? Something gets dropped. And it's no one's fault so far as everything got very busy very suddenly, but it's a problem of automation. So there's that piece, and then they need to do their individual tasks. Then they need to find problems, right? They need to find where not necessarily something slipped through the cracks, but where an exception happened, like a patient missed an appointment, or they left without a future appointment, right? Or they're calling to cancel an appointment, right? All these things that need to be tracked and dealt with. So as we go through, really, regardless of what app you're using on our engine, the goal is to automate. And this is really only available on our engine, partly because, you know, over 15 years ago when we put together this engine, it was put together from the financial end. You know, when you bring together people from think tanks like Bell Labs, you know, financial centers like Wall Street, you know, people who were so disillusioned by just the terrible things going on in the financial district that they left to, you know, make a better life for themselves by helping people in a sector they believed in, like healthcare. You start to recognize that if the goal is to make the life of the end user better and easier, then really all you want to be focused on is automation and compliance, you know. And unfortunately, most apps out there aren't built on such engines. You know, they're built on the idea that aesthetics matter more. And so what ends up happening is, you know, you get an app that looks very nice and still doesn't solve your real major problems. You know, the functionality could be all there, but it's all over the place. Right? And then there are little things that make life super frustrating, like having a lockbox for your payments, right? So you don't actually get your money right away. It's held over by your billing company or billing service, however you're doing it. They actually collect the money for you, which is really scary because, yeah, you might have a contract with them, but, you know, a contract really shouldn't be something that requires you to hold it, right? It shouldn't be something that ever really comes into play. A contract should be there to keep everybody safe, but in the end, there really should be no need to come back to that agreement, right? The relationship should be there, you know, and one of the basic reasons why we look at it this way, of course, is because we're a family owned and run company. And so we treat every one of our clients like family, regardless of what product you're using and which organizations we're teamed up with to make that happen. You know, whether you're an elite coaching client with Fred DiDomenico and you're using Genesis chiropractic software, or you're a client of Steve Peyrus and you're integrated medical and you're using the medically integrated app, or, you know, you're a physical therapist using Best PT, you know, whatever it is, there's that backbone understanding that the agreement is a formality. You know, it's kind of like a prenup. You know, it should never come into play. All it is peace of mind, but even that really shouldn't even come into play. The relationship should be that good, and not just with the owner of the office, but with everyone in the office. And so once we're able to take those members of the staff, especially the front office, these are the people that I really want to focus on today. If we're able to take the work that they need to do, automate that work so that they're focused on actually executing tasks. They're focused on talking to patients, following up with them, not finding the problems, not figuring out who needs a phone call, but actually making the phone calls. And, you know, and actually keeping track of just making sure that things got done in such a way that they're being kind of almost told that everything that needed to get done got done, so that when your office manager, or if you yourself are acting as the office manager, your spouse is acting as the office manager, which is common, you know, that person now, on the same token, no longer has to be a detective. They can actually spend their time looking at the problems, because the system is automating all of that as well. It's automating problem discovery. So it's telling you where the problems are, right? You've got an overworked front office person and an underworked front office person. Well, instead of waiting for the overworked person to start dropping things because there's too many balls in the air, you can actually jump in as soon as it starts becoming a problem and start shifting responsibility from one to the other so that the workload is the same, right? And the best part of that for office staff is now you really minimize the need to worry about your job. You know, one of the biggest concerns is, if we automate so much, why do I need to be here? Well, at the end of the day, someone needs to actually do the work. And so there's always a need for that human interaction. The difference is that you're able to deliver more when everything else is automated. And the more you're able to deliver, the more value you're able to provide. And just like a clinician looks at their value to the patient, the value provided to the clinic has to be greater than the value to you. In other words, as a clinician, I look at my patient and I think I need to provide a value above what I am charging the patient for that service, so that the patient justifies paying that out of pocket, or paying that money and submitting a claim to insurance. Same thing goes for employees, right? As an employee, I need to justify my pay by providing a greater value than what I cost to the practice. And the reality is that if you don't believe in that, then there's an issue, because if you cost more than the value you provide to the clinic's going to go out of business, right? And so it's a simple matter of math. You have to provide a greater value than what you cost, so that the clinic can produce revenue, positive revenue flow, so that they can afford to pay you, afford to improve the clinic, provide additional services to the patient, and so that the owner has something to take home and support their family, right? And so a lot of what goes into making a successful clinic depends so much on how you treat and how you work with your office staff, and how the office staff works with you, that, you know, I really hope that today we were able to squash some of the beliefs that are often held, that, you know, my job at minimum requires me to be a detective and requires me to do all this additional work, which is how I justify not getting to making all the phone calls I should make every day. I hope it also clarified how this engine, regardless of what app you're using on it, will make your life better by changing the way you look at your day-to-day workflow. And of course, at the owner and manager level, I really hope that this helps to show how you can motivate your staff better, how you can work better with your staff, how you can incentivize and motivate your staff in a way that they're now able to contribute more positively to the bottom line of the office, and really justify their salary, their pay. So obviously we're heading into the holidays, so we're not going to have any live casts now until the new year. This will be the last one for 2015. And I hope it was a good one. I always like to end on what I feel really is most important, and especially for the year, from what I learned, the office staff are so key, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts on that topic and your experiences as you work inside the engine, whether you're working on our medically integrated app or any of our other apps. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the new years. I hope in the new year. I hope you guys have great holidays, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you guys in 2016. Take care.